All right, we're live.
What up? Hi.
It's just the two of us.
Just the two of us. We can make
Oh, let me
it.
find out.
Hey, I can
Hey,
hold a
tell
couple
me
of
you
notes.
have vocals or whatever.
Nah, it's the church boy within.
How are you? How's everything?
Man, it has been extremely busy.
Mhm.
Coming back from Vegas, from a great birthday celebration with friends and family, and now it's time to come back. The big 35.
Oh, hey now, happy
I know, right?
birthday. That's
And
so you're my Taurus friend because mine is on Saturday.
yes, the Rock of the Bull. How you feeling?
I'm turning my Jesus year. So I'll
There
be
we go.
33.
That's a
So everything's gonna be, different. I feel like I'm gonna be in a different space, a different headspace, and
There we
hopefully
go.
I can get some Jesus moves
There you go. I think
this
also
year.
that was me when I was 33 too. I was just in prayer mode about like coming into like ministry, right? When Jesus came in 33, this is when he,
Mhm.
crucified. And so we learned about our life and really begin to appreciate it, but also the fulfillment of our life, right? And
Yeah,
so, more power to you. I think that God is going to definitely bless you even more than where you've been. And it's just about you, reaching your full potential. And
absolutely.
yeah,
You
yeah,
too. I'm glad we got to have this little Taurus conversation right now because the Bulls we don't get talked about very much because
yeah,
we're very
yeah,
peaceful, even though we're Bulls, we're stubborn. But
yes,
that Bull
yes,
come out,
yes, yes,
So shout out
exactly.
to everyone else who's a bull who's tuning in, and thank you guys for tuning in a little bit later today because we have a special episode. Of course, we just watched the first presidential address to Congress, Mr. Joseph R. Biden. I think he did really, really well. So we're going to talk about that as well as some of the news topics, and then we're going to have a couple of guests join us for a very important conversation, which will be part two of the how do you say it, Christian? The coalition fight for equity.
Yeah, the coalition fight for equity. Thinking for about equality, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how we work together as minorities, the minority majority, and just really figure out how we can support one another in this movement.
Definitely, definitely. So at this moment, I want to go ahead and introduce our special guest co-host. I saw that she just popped into the room backstage. I'll let you go ahead and do the honors, Christian.
Okay, cool. Yay, she got on. This is shout out to one of my dear friends, a sister of mine. She was a student of mine, but she was also a colleague of mine at UCLA. Miss Eliza Franklin. She has a great. She has a great intellect concerning African American studies, how we interact with one another. She's currently pursuing her master's. I believe it's urban planning at UCLA.
Urban and regional planning,
There
yes.
we go. There we go. And she knows her stuff. She is a mother. She's a student. She's an activist. She's an organizer, and she's about that life. And so I just really, really love and appreciate Eliza. Eliza, on there it says Makia Bryant, but in real
Right.
life, she's Eliza Franklin.
Hello, because she is I, and I am we.
I
Hello.
love that.
Could
You
have
are
been
our.
me. Could have been me.
We need that energy today, so I appreciate that. For those of you who are not familiar with Micaiah Bryant, she is the young lady who was shot, unfortunately, during an altercation in which many believe that she was defending herself. Either way, she didn't deserve to die. So I really appreciate you honoring her in that way. So we thank you for being here. And of course, we got our, always special, always on time. Mr. Bobby Boy Bob is in the building.
Shots fired. Shots fired. How y'all doing?
We are excellent. Did you get a chance to check out Biden's address today, or a
Listen,
little bit?
I was moving fast. I googled the highlights, but I didn't get to hear the whole thing. What did you guys think about it?
I thought it was great. So I'll hop into it because I watched it. Your boy Joseph R. Biden was in the building today. This is his first 100 days. So a lot of it was a recap of his first 100 days. He talked about COVID, obviously, the economy, war and terrorism, both domestically and internationally, but domestic is very important. He also spoke about immigration and voting. So he pretty much covered all the pieces on the chessboard today, which I thought he did very well. He was very bipartisan within, a lot of his policies that he was speaking to. He didn't do what number 40, whatever he was, used to do and call out people specifically to, you know, try to start confrontation. Rather, he actually applauded some of his fellow Republican congressmen that, you know, he felt as though were reaching across the aisle in terms of some of the policies that they were setting forth. So one of the highlights, I thought that was really important, definitely was when he was speaking about the budget. So we know the big beef between Democrats and Republicans is the notion of taxes, you know. So Republicans are saying, oh, they want to take control. They want to tax. But Biden was like, no, I just want to tax those who make over $400,000 per year so that they can pay their equal share. He also alluded to what happened in 2017 with the major tax cuts and how that really, you know, reflected a divide and a demise within our economy. So that was very important. He talked about the tax credit for every child of $3,000 to parents. So I was like, ooh, let me go make some babies. Let's make this happen. So I was really happy about that. But yeah, so I think overall he did really well. Tim Scott, are you guys familiar with Tim Scott, the Republican? He did the rebuttal. And it's just interesting because I believe he's the only Black congressman that there is right now. And they're kind of using him to push their agendas. And he did his rebuttal and said, you know, well, I'm Black. I grew up, you know, with a single mother and, you know, told his story. And it was very disheartening to me to think that they were kind of using that ploy and using the plight of Black America to make their, you know, to kind of make their pledge against Biden. So overall, I thought it was great. I'm excited to see what happens next. I still haven't gotten the COVID vaccine. That's going to be a conversation that we're going to continue to have over and over. But yeah, what do you guys think about Biden so far, his first 100 days?
I have a lot to say. You want to go first? Y'all want to go? You want to go, Christian?
Yeah, I don't mind. I'll go first. And Eliza, feel welcome at home to jump
absolutely.
in, and you can do whatever you want, talk about whatever you want. Feel free, okay?
Okay.
But for myself, I feel like with Joe Biden, he has done a lot of work since in the last 100 days. I am kind of disappointed that he did not take under the stuff that we were working on, the U.S. Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. So we're still working on it. You know, we're in here for the long haul. Also, I did not like the fact that he didn't speak about reparations per se. I believe we discussed that as well. And so, you know, I know that there are talks behind the scenes about it. And so, again, you know, while we're dealing with the racial, and this is a heavy topic that we're talking about today with racial equity, you know, our presidents in politics, they're very, very, very delicate. They walk around on eggshells when it concerns race. And so that is a little scary to me. However, I do have a little bit more hope in Joe Biden. And I think that he's going to be able to come through with a lot more. He did help out with coronavirus, you know, the stimulus. I am in hopes of another stimulus, please. And also, you know, I'll leave it at that.
They working on it.
Give me some money.
Right.
I think.
Go ahead, Eliza.
Oh, go ahead, Eliza, please.
No, I was just going to highlight, first off, talking about that stimulus. I'm a mother of 4 and have yet to receive my stimulus, right?
No.
So everyone's not getting their stimulus check. Let me clarify that, right? And secondly, when we talk about race, I don't think it's all races that there's an issue about talking about, because we have Asians at the forefront, and they say Asian multiple times, right, within Congress with no fear, and have passed the bill, which he gladly applauded about, right? And it made me think about reparations and anti-Blackness, right? And what is the issue with passing bills relative to us and police brutality? But we're so proudly clapping within Congress when we talk out and talk about COVID-19 and addressing Asian hate, right? That's my stance. So, Joe, we got you in. We need you to do more, Joe.
A second thought.
I think Joe Biden has done a great job with COVID-19. I think it was, you know, one of the premier issues in our generation, in the century, and definitely around the election. The fact that pretty much anyone in America can get a vaccine now, I didn't think that was going to happen. So I applaud him on that. From an economy standpoint, I'm impressed. I'm impressed there too, because the stimulus packages have seemed to help. I don't know about his long-term economic plan, but his immediate short-term plans have worked. Or I'm disappointed is, well, in race and reparations, but, you know, everybody that's even Black doesn't agree on reparations. So for me, I think it's hard for me to put it on, whatever president is, whether it's Barack Obama or Biden, when in our own community, I think there needs to be an idea of what we need from reparations. But I do really think that he missed the ball and dropped the ball on immigration. He's had the opportunity to repeal from with an executive order some of the issues and some of the standards that the past president put into place, and he just hasn't. And that's something that was really big too, speaking about how we don't want kids in cages, we're going to do better at the border. And there hasn't been material change from when Trump's been in office. One other thing is he seems to me like he's going forward and trying to mend everybody. He said he was going to be the president that goes across the aisle and deal with both parties. And I'm like, that's great if it works. But don't tell me you're sitting around here with like trying to be cool with everybody and it's not working. So the first 100 days, if I had to give him a grade, it would be a C+, B-. But yeah, we still got a lot to go, a lot to see.
Yeah, I can agree with you.
On a curve, considering all of what's going on. Is it a curve or is it?
That's you can put it on a curve. There's a COVID curve because like you got to give them extra credit for that. But for the rest, like you could have done a lot more for immigration, and he could have done a lot more. And he has, and him and the vice president have come out and said like the George Floyd bill, and they're going to do more for to stop police brutality, but not enough. Like definitely not enough. When it comes to gun control, when it comes to being very stern on police injustice, when it comes to protecting police officers that harm individuals, what really needed to happen was use executive orders. But it's hard to do that and still say you're going to work with both aisles. Because I think he knows if he comes out with executive orders, these Republicans are going to go in a hole and be like, that's it. So if you're going to work with everybody and you got a long game that I don't know the whole game yet, keep playing your game, but you better win.
And that's my problem with executive orders. It's like, I mean, as soon as Trump came in, he was like, bow, 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 and just knocking them out. I feel like, why do we have to be so timid with that? Like you said, hopefully in the long haul, in the long run, that he does come through with different executive orders. I mean, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but, me and my team, we were able to write an executive order. And so we're just waiting for him to sign it, right? And so we're going to keep pushing it.
And what was that order? Can you dig a little bit deeper into that, please?
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the first ever Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Commission to be enacted in the United States. I don't know if you guys are familiar with South Africa and the apartheid. And so there was a reconciliation commission over there. But specifically with ours, we want to look at reparations, and not just a monetary value, but there's many forms of reparations that come into it. And so, we can have a whole show about that, but I will leave on that note.
Definitely. Well, I do want to say, I have a quote in regards to policing, more so mass shootings and, domestic terrorism. Joe Biden did say, we're not changing the Constitution, we're being reasonable, because he does want to ban assault weapons and high capacity magazines. And he was just like, why do you guys need high capacity magazines? Like, what is it for? You need that for a deer? Like, this is directly something that he said. And what I really like to do is, while he was speaking, is kind of look at the responses from the people in the audience. I did see Ted Cruz falling asleep. So I know that that's probably going to be a meme. I saw that. And I just saw people just, on the other side, just not happy with what he was saying. But I do also want to mention that this is the first time ever that we had two females sitting kind of in the chamber with him. So we had Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, as well as Kamala Harris, that were both females standing behind him. And he had recognized that. So I thought that was really empowering and good as well. He did also mention passing H.R. 1, which is the For the People Act, which is a bill in the United States Congress to expand voting rights, change campaign finance laws to reduce the influence of money in politics. So I think that was pretty important. He spoke about as well. So I would grade him a B minus. I think I'll grade him a B minus too. What about you, the other two? I didn't get the other two grades.
I would give him a flat C right now. No minus, no plus, just a C. He's just riding. I'm waiting to see. He could go up or down.
Okay.
I like that, Eliza. I'm going to give him about a good B minus. I'll give him a B minus.
Okay. So we got to see where he goes from here. All right. So we have other news. Definitely. We do have other news. I don't know, for those of you that are not in California or aren't familiar with Gavin Newsom, they are attempting to get rid of your boy. And Lawrence, you could probably speak to this a little bit more in regards to Gavin Newsom and them trying to recall his gubernatorial run right now. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so this is one of those areas, and this can kind of piggyback off what we were just speaking about with Joe Biden. Gavin Newsom rubbed a lot of people the wrong way with this handling of the COVID-19 vaccine, the rollout, and the restrictions. He upset business owners because he mandated closings. He upset small business owners because he was like, hey, you know, some big businesses can still operate, but small business owners, bar owners, people that were beauticians, people that own nail salons, that's a large majority of the individuals in the state. They weren't able to work for long periods of time. So now that we're coming out of that, whatever he does, they're like, no, you need to get out because you didn't handle it right. Now, on the flip side, California has the lowest infection rate of any state in the union, and we have more vaccines in people's arms than anyone else. So on one side, you could say it kind of worked, but the cost seemed to be too great for a lot of people. And we live in the United States of America, where if you're Black, brown, Chinese, whatever, you want your right, you want your freedom to do what you want to do. You don't like people telling you what to do. That to me is as American of a core as they can be. So I don't have a personal opinion on whether, you know, he should be recalled. And with the recall too, recall election basically says we end up spending a lot of money. You put him back on the ballot. Somebody else runs against him. We had a very similar situation like this with Gray Davis before, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So California is used to doing recalls. We do this. If we don't like you, we gonna kick you out. We're not gonna wait till it's for it to end. But my personal opinion, and it's hard because like I wasn't affected. No one in my close family thankfully died from COVID, and also no one in my close immediate family that I know had like extreme hardships, like was homeless because of COVID. So for me, that like I'm okay. I'm like, hey, it all worked out. We're fine now. But I could see how somebody that has a personal feeling one way or another would have stronger feelings.
Definitely. What do you guys think about Gavin?
I think thinking about this, we already know that conservatives really wanted him out anyway, right? So this was just a push just to get him out of office. But I mean, there should be a level of gratitude that we should be grateful in California that now we're open all the way back up, basically, for the most part. And so what would that have looked like if we allowed hair salons, right? And nail salons and these small businesses, which are places where there are numerous carriers going in and out, traveling here, there, and everywhere, right? We probably would be in a major lockdown right now. So I think that he made the best decisions that he could have made in the position that he was in, right? If the numbers were otherwise, then we would be having a different discussion. But no, I don't think it's time to say bye, Gavin, right? It's too soon to make that move.
Yeah. Christian, what about you?
You already know how I feel about it. It's a bunch of bull. And so my thing as a proud Democrat and a delegate, and someone that really pushes for Newsom, I would say the Republicans, like my colleagues have stated, it's more of just the Republicans wanting to do a conservative push. They already didn't like Newsom, so now they have the opportunity. Even like they gained over like 500,000 signatures or something like that. They gained so much money. And I live in a very conservative area, the Antelope Valley. They had signs, they had billboards. They had the little trucks that had the little signs on the thing driving by. They invested so much money in it. And there's little pockets all over California that specifically are conservative. So they're just, fighting their way. They're doing their due diligence because they don't like what Newsom did. For me, I like Newsom. I think he has a lot of swag. I think he also cares about Black people. And he also is, I don't want to say a radical, but I think he's very progressive. He's done things. I mean, for him to support a reparations bill in the state of California, I mean, that speaks highly of what he thinks of what we can do and accomplish. And follow his Instagram.
His Instagram is lit.
His Instagram is so lit. So yeah, I really think that I feel like Gavin is going to win this if we just step up to it. So yeah,
definitely. I also want to put another. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, and who has better hair than him in office as a politician? Full head of hair, okay?
Nobody.
It's the jail for me.
Okay. I also want to mention too, if you put it into perspective, and Lawrence, you can kind of help back me up as I'm explaining this. If let's say, hypothetically, they do demand a recall, right? Nobody on the Democratic side is going to go against Gavin. So it's going to be all these Republicans, including the Jenner, right? Did you guys hear about that?
Wait, are they serious?
It's Caitlyn Jenner, right?
Yeah, it's serious.
Caitlyn Jenner's
Caitlyn Jenner is planning.
Caitlyn Jenner's very serious.
Very serious. So with that being said,
this is white privilege. This is what we're talking about. Like, come on. You ain't got no credentials, but you want to just run. Get out of here.
But that's okay, because guess what? The Kardashians are not backing her. So
they're not for it. They're not having it. But I said this to say that let's say there's a House seat that's lost within this transition. If a Republican does decide to run and win, then that leaves an open seat, correct? So then that person can then vote to put someone in that place. So the stakes are high from my understanding in terms of, because we're already like at 50-50 is real slim right now. And then also Arizona, they're doing what they're trying to do, recount some votes on some stupid stuff. So I really think conservatives in general are just really, going for these Hail Mary moments right now, just to try to gain some control back, because we're very, very slimly ahead of them right now. It's still not looking good. And then also think about the fact that a lot of Californians of urban minority groups are moving out of California and going into, the South. That's why you're seeing some of these states turn blue, while California is slowly turning a little bit more red. Yeah. So we have to really put all of this into perspective. I saw your facial expression, Lawrence. What was that?
I would just say, I think it's important for all of us to make sure we're not focusing too much on party lines. We want to have a Democratic presence in all of the chambers because we believe that will be in our best interest. But I feel like we owe it to ourselves and to our communities to evaluate each individual candidate. I'm not against voting for a Republican if their ideals align with mine. So, party lines are important, but we just always want to make sure before I judge any candidate, I want to know who they are individually.
Yeah.
And like Caitlyn Jenner, I don't think you need experience to be a politician. Like there are plenty of, especially local politicians that are teachers, that are regular people from the community. You just have to have a good heart and a willingness to do good. Now, Caitlyn Jenner, I don't know about that, but I was just saying that, I don't know.
You're in support of Caitlyn just right now. That was a whole.
I'm not in support.
No. I'm not supporting Caitlyn.
Why would we put you in any political position? You can't even run your own household.
Thank you. You said it. Yeah, so we'll follow that. It's going to be, interesting to see what happens. I don't think Gavin is going anywhere. I think before all of this controversy, they've been nitpicking at him because I think he had, before all of this, had a very good shot at the presidency at some point, because he just fits the bill in a lot of ways to where that could be a possibility. So I don't know if that's going to happen now. I don't know, but I still rock with him. I follow his Instagram. We'll see. So I do want to go into another serious conversation. This actually hits me very close at home. As I mentioned, Biden did mention, the George Floyd Act that he's looking to pass, once they get to the year mark of George Floyd's death. Policing and brutality is just at an all-time high right now. So I might be stumbling over my words because this is very, very sensitive for me. So I recently became aware of a situation in my family, and I'll just play a little bit of the video so you guys can watch.
What are y'all getting from
Okay. So you guys, that is my cousin. I call her cousin Auntie Stephanie Bottom, who lives in Atlanta, Georgia. This was actually back in 2019. She was on her way to a family member's funeral in North Carolina. As she was driving to the funeral, she was quote unquote speeding, going maybe 10 or 15 above the speed limit. The North Carolina police decided to pursue her. She wasn't aware. She is older. She was listening to her music, enjoying her life. They proceeded to put spikes in front of her car in order to blow her tires out, and she pulled over. And she was very much so confused, and then that proceeded to happen. The reason why this is coming out is because a lawsuit did go into place against the North Carolina Police Department, who actually is in the news right now for another killing that just happened last week, if you guys are keeping up with, all of the different situations that are happening. But this, for me, when it hits home, when you see it, it's just a whole different story. And just the rage I felt when I first saw this was out of this world. I was crying. I was enraged. That's my family. That's my blood. And she's older. And to think that they could have total, complete disregard for her body as a woman and as an elderly person. And obviously she didn't have any, she wasn't of danger to anyone. You can see on the video that she was completely confused as to what was going on. There's so many different ways that they could have handled that situation. They tore her shoulder. So she's still dealing with that to this day. But I wanted to show that, and I just wanted to show that this could be anybody's family member. This could be anyone that is dealing with this situation. And when it hits home, it's a whole different story. Like when I say I was enraged, like I want to go kill somebody type of rage, that's how I felt. So just imagine what everyone else in the country who has dealt with this felt like. So I did want to show that. I'm hopeful that maybe this George Floyd bill will be passed, but it didn't look like it when I was looking at the responses from the Republicans that were in the room. So what do you guys think moving forward?
Well, first off, oh no, go ahead, Lawrence.
Our guest, please start.
First off, all I can think in my mind, they didn't have to do auntie like that. Okay, first and foremost. Secondly, I thought about the gentleman who was saying, hide your kids, hide your wife. It's a rapist running around. Hide our kids, hide our wives, hide our husbands, hide our partners, because they're just on a rampage, just killing us, right? And it's not stopping. And I think as a victim, right, because I'm a descendant of a lynching victim, it does hit home. But we come from a communal society, right, as Black people. So whether it's your direct relative or indirect relative, you feel that same pain, that visceral anger when you see something like that occur, right? And so there needs to be action. I'm not moved by these bills and things they throw out here. You want to do it on a celebratory day, on the George Floyd anniversary. His anniversary is every single day Black people are living in this country in America. Okay, so you don't have to wait till then to pass it. It's been a whole lot of George Floyds before there was a George Floyd, first off, and I don't think it's gonna pass. And so what does that look like for us coming to peace with that idea and figuring out what are we going to do? We need to start electing our people and gearing up to prepare ourselves. That was a small victory in we're in full-on war, right? We got to understand we are at war with our own country, right? And we live in a country that was birthed and created by rapists, pillagers, thieves, every kind of criminal you can think of. So why are we sitting up here thinking legislation is going to set us free when the authoritative legislation is what they have used to enslave us, literally and figuratively, for so long? So he can keep his bill. It means nothing to me coming from a white man in office that Black people elected, right? And moreover, Black women did a lot of the brunt of the work to get him in the office. It means nothing to me. At the end of the day, Joe Biden, our president, Joe Biden, is still a white man, right? And he's in a position where it's the majority of white men, right, in Congress. They're not going to allow that to pass. We're still living in the good old boy days now. They just wear suits and ties, and they don't have their white robes anymore. But you best believe when they go home, that kitchen table talk, they are not signing that into any. They're not signing it. That's all.
Yeah, you said it. You said it all. You definitely said it all. Lauren, you had it.
I don't know if I can follow up after that.
Okay.
So, bills that move us in the right direction are important. I think that John Lewis once said, his famous quote, get into good trouble. So I think it takes civil disobedience that leads to progressive legislation that gets us out of a lot of the holes that we're in as African Americans living in this country. Now, everything that Michaela said is true in the respect that we live in a country where it hasn't been that way, and we're definitely at war with a system that was created to be racist. Now, we have this conversation argument all the time. I'm not saying that all police are racist. I'm not saying that all white people are racist. What I'm saying is the system was created to have situations like this. The laws were created to allow an officer to rip an elderly Black woman out of her car without consequence. So until we change all of the laws, there's not going to be the type of change that we want. And so if we're talking about an incremental change of saying, hey, we need to stop qualified immunity, that's still not the problem when you're training individuals to be aggressive and to not de-escalate situations, or you're giving individuals the freedom and liberty. When I call them individuals, because that's what they are to me, like, you can be a police or an individual. You're just a person with a gun, and you have the liberty to go and do whatever you want. We need to change those laws. And so I agree with Michaela in this, that we need more. We need more than just a bill. We need comprehensive, that means full off, complete police system change in this country.
Yeah. And I also think we need to hit them in their pockets completely.
Yeah.
One thing that my cousin, who's her son, we spoke for a very long time, that he mentioned was, why don't we have someone lobbying on our behalf? These lobbyists go in and they have the money. These big corporations, they have the money to sway legislation, to sway these politicians in every which way that they can. Why isn't Jay-Z, Puffy, all of these Black millionaires and billionaires putting forward some sort of money representation towards lobbying? Why is that not something that's possible?
I think the difference is that we have a billionaire in Jay-Z, we have a billionaire in P. Diddy, and the lobbyists, they have 15 billionaires that come together and then they put their money together. We don't have enough of the economic ability. We have a one-off billionaire, and Oprah, Jay-Z, and P. Diddy can't save us all. And then with these other groups, there's literally 15, 30. They have these banquets where everybody there has more than $500 million. And so everybody can give $1 million towards something. Until we get that type of economic sustainability and capabilities, we're not going to be able to. And this, I don't want to get too off topic, but I'm like, that's the reason why we have to create our own products. We have to, I forgot, I was going to call him a name. I don't want to say that. He was on the Breakfast Club recently. I don't want to call him. Umar Johnson. Dr. Umar. There we go. I don't agree with everything he says, but some of the things he's talking about is like, we need to train ourselves, we need to educate ourselves, and we need to build our own businesses. We need to create our own food. Then we can have that type of power when we're creating it from the ground up.
I agree. Well, I definitely, we're going to keep having these conversations. I'll update you all on what happens with my cousin Auntie. Keep my family in your prayers, because this is a rough one, definitely. But I do want to switch gears, because you are watching the part 2 of our conversation, in which we had a wonderful conversation with Baldwin Chu and his wife 2-3 weeks ago regarding AAPI hate, and how Black Americans and the Asian community Americans can come together to find some sort of community in terms of our fight towards racial inequality. So I do want to introduce Kenney Tran. He is a returned Peace Corps volunteer with experience in anti-racist work in higher education, as well as international development. He is currently a Master's of Public Administration candidate at the University of Washington, working to address racial determinants of public health and working across diasporas through storytelling and civic engagement to create coalitions for equitable future. Please welcome Kenney Tran to the Yep Live show.
Pleasure to be here, everyone. Just really inspired to listen to everything that you all had to say so far. I mean, Bobby, you've really just said it all right there. It's all about building power, right? Like trying to get people into public office who look like us. So, it starts from there, and I think that's where it's at. And like you said, Sharik, like, got to hit them where their money is. Yeah,
definitely. So I'll kind of kick it off, and then anyone else who has a question, feel free to jump in when you can. So Kenney, in terms of, the conversation that we had previously, I know that you did watch the show. We talked about a lot of the historical context to the Asian American community and the Black community and our interconnections within these communities, and how there has been this divisiveness and how there's been somewhat of a community, but it hasn't been highlighted as much. So overall, in terms of your experience and maybe within your community and what you hear people discussing, what do you think may be the biggest issue that's stopping the Black community and the Asian American community from coming together?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it boils down to human connectivity, right? Like, I think the big thing that we always ignore is like the power of individualism, right? Like, there are so many places in the world where people just refuse to talk to other people based on the color of skin, where what neighborhood you come from, what your parents' last name is, like stuff like that. And like I was also speaking with Larissa and Baldwin a couple weeks ago when they were going down to like talk about like the filming of their movie, and in places in the South, like it really didn't matter, whether or not you were Black or Asian. It was like, that's my neighbor. I got to protect my neighbor regardless of the race. And I think one of the biggest things and one of the biggest problems that we face as a multicultural diaspora is the fact that white supremacy has been able to divide our communities, right? Like just being able to pivot one diaspora over the other. And, it goes back to things like the model minority myth, which was addressed briefly in the last episode as well, about like, leveraging Asian American communities in a way that they can work with whiteness to oppress other people of color. And I think once we realize that we have so much in our mutual struggle against white supremacy, that's where the real conversation starts. It's about the mutual enemy that we have, not pointing fingers at each other and, taking blame on our own communities.
Definitely, definitely. So then in regards to the bill that was just
I got it. I got to disagree with a few things. Did anybody else want to speak?
No, go ahead.
So like I agree with you in the concept and like a global concept of individualism and building coalitions from a person-to-person basis. And I do agree that the overall enemy is, again, the systemic racism of this country. But even within that, how do you suggest that we deal with the individual hate that's there? We have communities where people on both sides have dislike, distrust, disrespect for the Asian community, from Black to Asian and Asian to Black, from different stereotypes and different realities in the communities that we live in, from the view that, of cultural appropriation, the view of divesting money from our communities, of feeling like, hey, I'm a Black person, I live in this neighborhood, why is there a Chinese food place and there is a Chinese food restaurant and there's a beauty supply store and they're gaining wealth in our community and we can't build that wealth ourselves? And then on the flip side of seeing like there are individual Asian individuals that I've run into that's just like disrespectful, racist on that end as well. So how do you feel that we deal, even though the cloaking enemy again is the overall oppression, how do we deal with the person-to-person level of getting us to have those conversations?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, it's so hard, right? Like just to be able to sit down and have these real conversations. I remember last year, we did a conversation between the AAPI community and the Black community as well about what do we do to have these conversations and talk about our individual realities, right? Like all of us come to the table with different paradigms of the way we see the world based on our lived experiences. And we can't just sit there and go like, no, you're wrong. Like if that hasn't happened to me, it hasn't happened to you. Like we have to sit down, acknowledge the harm that we may have caused, whether or not it is personally us or whether or not it was people in our communities, right? Like at times it's going to be hard to sit in a room and just be like, yo, like this happened. Acknowledge it. We have to be accountable to not only ourselves, but our communities overall, right? Like these are conversations that just need to be constantly had, and they're never going to be easy. If they were easy, they would have already been had, and I think that's a great point.
I agree. Thank you. I think that was a perfect response. I fully agree.
Christian?
I'm gonna let Eliza go first.
Did you see me talking in my mind?
I did.
Well, first and foremost, I think it's one of the conversations that needs to be had, right, is addressing this idea of being Asian, right? So often when we talk about being Asian, we leave out of the conversation. We make it a certain phenotype, and we leave out Middle Eastern individuals, right? They're Asian. And so we don't even discuss that dichotomy that exists within the Asian society, right? Where there's the haves and the have-nots. And so this idea, when we talk about the model minority, we are considering more those who are fairer skin, right? As in most races, right? The fairer skinned people within the Asian race have a different experience, right, than those who are darker skinned. And I can assure you that most of the racism that is being discussed between the dialogue concerning Black and Asian relations is adjacent to the ones who are more fairer skinned, right? And with that being said, I think when you have that discussion, it's a tough discussion. But when we have to, I mean, be honest that there is a fiscal divide, right? There's your own banking systems, your own places to go bank to where I, as a Black person, cannot go get a loan. Money is everything in America. That's what I feel. And so we can talk in circles all day, but show me the money. In what ways are we having the important conversations about money, our communities? Why is it that I'm going to the Slauson Mall, right? Sits on Slauson, appropriates Black culture, built on the backs of Black celebrities and rappers and everything, but you don't see Black faces as owners within there. You see them renting spaces, right? So what does that look like? Actually give the land back. It's like when we discuss any indigenous group, when are we going to have the hard conversations about giving land back or about appropriation, right? The clear appropriation. We can't move forward and have this kumbaya moment without having that dialogue. I don't think.
I understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kenny, any thoughts in regards to what Eliza and Ms. Bryan is saying, as well as Lawrence? I would love for us to continue with the conversations. I hear what you're saying, but I think it's also great for us. For me, I feel like we've had a lot of conversations. So how do we move past the conversations and discussions into action, right? So yes, we can do many different critical conversations, but what do you think is some solutions for us to fight for Black Lives Matter while also fighting for Asian Pacific Islander, and what the hate in that realm as well. How do we combine forces, and how do you see that happening in the future? Do you see it happening, and how do we move into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this is so interconnected, and just all the conversations that need to be had, like again, like referencing last episode, we need to start moving from conversations to solution sets, right? Like, how do we move towards that? And I think it's not just about like creating these coalitions, but empowering these coalitions to push forward. One of the biggest things is obviously building economic wealth. And what does that look like? That looks like policies that empower people, right? Like we see the dichotomy and the difference between, even during the time of COVID, small business loans as it pertains to, AAPI communities, white communities, and then Black business owners who don't get the same kind of treatment. And that starts at the very front and foremost by electing people in Congress that have proximate leadership to our communities, right? Like as much as, white people are able to go on and, talk about the things that they want to do for our communities, they didn't come from the communities that we came from, right? Like that's just a traditional thing that is about proximate leadership. No one will ever understand what these communities face than people who came from the communities. And I think that's the first step. From there is when you start leveraging your power, right? But in America, our dollar is our power. And if we start working together, pushing for candidates who represent what we want to bring to the table, that's the first step. And after that, it's about building the community as well, not just in terms of, like person to person, but like a large group. I think that one of the good things about living in Seattle is that I've seen a lot of people show up for different events, right? Like I've seen Asian Americans show up for Black Lives Matter movements. I've seen Black Americans show up for Stop AAPI Hate, because there's a sense of community interconnectedness there, that our struggle is all mutual. right? Like a rising tide lifts all sails. That if we stop one accident of hate, that means we can stop another one, right? We can't just let things slide because they don't directly impact us, or at least for face value, they don't impact us. Because I think we live in a world where, people, especially, racists out there in the world, they say, well, if I can get away with this one act, what about the next? What about the next, right?
Yeah. I want to bring up this comment really quickly by Marcus Tyson. He said, great remarks by Ms. Bryant, referring to Eliza. Access to credit and capital has been supported by government for Asian Americans and denied fair treatment to Black financial service institutions. So I just kind of wanted to get your response about that, Kenney. I know you're studying this. So,
yeah, absolutely.
What would be your response to that?
I mean, that's absolutely true, right? Like there is a substantial amount of evidence that shows that, like small businesses have been supported by, Asian American small businesses are disproportionately more supported than Black small businesses. And I don't think there's anything that, any evidence that you can use to fight against that fact. I think just going forward, how do we start moving towards equal loan opportunities or just equal opportunities, period? Because I think one of the biggest problems in America that we face when it comes to race is that people say, well, it's an equal opportunity country. It's absolutely not, right? Like if you're putting things logistically into like this framework of like what are the inputs that people are getting, right? Like does everyone have the same access to loans and capital? Absolutely not. So if you're to take that into consideration, why are you saying, well, if everyone has equal access to this, why are some businesses failing and some people can't get businesses off the ground? If they never had access to capital in the first place, they can't start their business.
Right. Definitely. Well, I have a follow-up question too, because I've been kind of doing my own research and following some of the representatives in the community, the Asian American community, who talk about the disproportionate racism between our two communities. And they do bring up a lot of the more the feelings overall in general within the Asian community and their feelings towards Black Americans and how there is a lot of their own racism within, their belief systems. I just wanted to know, is there a system or is anyone addressing that? Is there anyone in your community that's going to, whether it be the elderly Asians that still have these old, ideals of Black people? What are you teaching these people that still have their reserved feelings towards African Americans? And is there anything like that happening, or is it just kind of a quiet thing that people just kind of shrug under the rug?
I think these are definitely individual conversations that are being had, and there's so many great social media accounts that do a great job at it. I know last summer, the Black Lives Matter cards was a thing on Instagram where you could send or print out, like why do Black Lives Matter in AAPI communities? Printing them out in Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, and so many other languages to have these conversations and kickstart them. This reminds me of an absolutely fantastic article that I read about from Nikki Chow. And it talks about how, especially for the Vietnamese American community, there's a lot of sense of gratitude towards America, right? Especially considering the fact that so many Asian Americans came over as a result of war. And we have this sense of gratitude towards, America, this idealistic state. But it's never considering the fact that this nation was built on the backs of indigenous genocide and enslaved Black Americans, right? Like if we're going to be pay any gratitude towards this country that brought us in, we got to pay gratitude towards the people who were fighting to bring us in the first place. The amount of Black Americans who were out in the streets historically protesting the Vietnamese war and then once again accepting Vietnamese communities when they came in is absolutely outstanding. And so again, like Larissa and Baldwin had said last week, we have to talk about the history. There's so much history of unity, and I think again, negative publicity sells more press than any positive news does, right? But when we're talking about the historical unity that we've had as communities in our efforts against white supremacy, it's all there. We just need to bring that back, and again, maybe remind our elders who didn't grow up in the United States the historical implications of why this matters. But again, there's also just an incredible amount of colorism at times within the AAPI community itself, and there's so many different ways and tactics in which we can get these conversations started.
I was just thinking maybe could help make this even more tangible for everyone involved. I think maybe we can go around and give Kenney some ideas of how we would appreciate him and his community to go around and speak to others in his community. Because something you brought up is absolutely right. If we're talking about young, progressive, educated individuals, we're not the ones that have the problem. You know, we're on it on these type of shows. Kenney, you're giving your time, your energy. You're obviously educated of the issues involved. You're not the issue. The issue might be, you know, I'm just figuratively speaking, a grandparent or somebody else in the community that doesn't have the same access to information and knowledge. So how, and I could just suggest, or we can go back and forth about this. Like, I would like to see individuals like yourself come up with tangible community ways of educating the others in your community that don't understand or don't have the knowledge. So then we can be on a fair playing field. And if there's any way that you can see it for us, because, you know, if there's a young progressive African-American, if you think that we could go in our communities and share more positive information or things you would like us to share in a tangible way to help your community as well.
Love that.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, I think we live in the age of social media, but unfortunately, you know, at times, maybe it is, hypothetically speaking, like the elders who are the issue, right? Like, they might not be on these social media platforms and able to, like, have access to all these resources. Again, like, I wish we lived in America where broadband access was, like, also a thing that everyone had, but unfortunately, maybe in these rural areas where people grew up uneducated and to no fault of their own, but a fault of the system, aren't able to have the same educational resources that were allotted. And I think the work starts there, and maybe it doesn't start with, you know, sending Instagram posts or anything like that, but it starts with the heart-to-heart conversation, right? Like, these conversations are never going to be easy, like I had said before. And again, like, there's so many great books out there, but you can only lead a horse to water so much, but you can't force it to drink, right? Like, you can ship someone anti-racist books or history books on coalition building and the histories between AAPI and Black communities, but if they don't want to read it, they're not going to read it, right? So it's an incredibly difficult road to navigate, but I definitely think it starts with just opening up the conversation and being vulnerable and just being, hey, let's talk about these issues that impact us, right? Like, these are very real issues, and I think that one of the biggest things is that we're afraid to have these conversations because they're hard. You know, people are gonna not want to have them at times because of how heated or difficult they may get.
That's fair.
Well, I think for me, the first thing I want to say, being a byproduct of Alabama, let's not generalize the rural areas. Okay, they're getting information. We got cable and everything else out there, so they're getting it. Secondly, I would say, you know, I hate when I'm the Black person in the room and they check off the box and they say, okay, what are the solutions you would like to take back to the Black people, right? I don't represent all Black people, and I want to be clear and say, what is your identifying nationality? Because Asian and AAPI covers a multitude, right, of nationalities within that. And so that's something I would like us to consider, the viewers watching, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, I was going to ask you, where are you located? But you said Seattle. So with that being said, I know for me, and being an LA native, what they can do for me is the Asian community within LA, right? Moreover, specifically the Korean community can apologize for Latasha Harlan's murder, right? That's a beginning point, because that is a sore area for people who live in Los Angeles across generations, right? We are reminded of this, and it sits with us as a place where, okay, now we're at this moment in time, this nexus, where we're considering how can we bridge these gaps when we have this gaping wound that is bleeding all over the place in this region, this area. I can't speak about where you're at. So I know that's one thing that needs to be done within Los Angeles. I think another thing specifically that can be addressed, right, is having a dialogue of just cultural sensitivity, right? I can't tell you how many of my friends that go get their nails done, and I know the majority of the owners of those places are Vietnamese, right? And so being mindful that you not only remember historically that it was built on the blacks of Black people, but currently our Black dollar is what is keeping most of these Asian businesses afloat that are within our communities, right? It's us going there that's buying the hair that's monopolized. It's us going to the slots and swap meet that's buying everything that's up and through there, right? It's us that's going to all these little mom and pop places, swiping that EBT card, and we're being followed around the store, right? So I think that's a conversation to be had, right? not just at this moment in time where it feels like, you know, we talk about the oppression Olympics, right? And how we don't want to outdo one another. We also don't want to be at this moment in time where we're like, okay, well, right now we're just gonna pull them on over because we know that they've been chanting and singing and humming and marching for years and years and years. So let's get the Black people to come on in so we can all kumbaya together. So that will really give us some movement and momentum to what we're addressing in society at large. And then when it's all said and done, right, you guys wash your hands of us and leave us again to be killed by the police and spending up all our money in stores where we are followed and our dollar is not appreciated.
All of that. All of that. I will say I saw something on the news recently. There is a store, like a cafe somewhere in Los Angeles. And I think it was just taken over by the younger generation. They took the son took over the store, and he has a juice that's called Latasha's Juice. And they went in the news and they interviewed him, and he said, "This is for her." He said, I want to bridge this gap, and I want to recognize her because this is something awful that happened in the community. And I want to recognize the African-American community and say, no, that was not okay what happened to her. And we did wrong by her. So, I will say, I know that there's definitely a generational gap between, the Asian American community and the African American community. And then you let me know, Kenney, do you think also maybe language barriers have something to do with it? The fact that we may not be able to communicate effectively because they, maybe they don't speak English too well, or, I'm just throwing it out there. I just wonder.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I just read a book recently about the power of immigration and how just like a study on open borders and how it'd be beneficial for the economy overall. But one of the biggest proponents as to why Asian American populations in general have been so quick to assimilate to American culture is because of the language barrier, right? Like so many Asian American children by their by the first or second generation, I think it's 82% forget like the native language, right? Like how are you supposed to communicate with your elders when you don't speak that language, And it's that concept of like assimilating to America and almost like your proportionality to whiteness is what gets you by. Like we were having all these conversations before about, the monolithic like experience that people think AAPI citizens have, but at the same time, it's, you see Southeast Asians, you see South Asians, and especially Middle Easterners as well, who suffer like substantially higher poverty rates than their East Asian counterparts, or even, in some cases, white and Latinx counterparts as well. I just think it is such a difficult conversation when you are living in two very different parallel worlds, right? You have this, person older than we are who lived through a war-torn experience and what came to this country and just isn't able to comprehend, all of this history in comparison to someone who grew up with all of this history and isn't able to communicate, right? Like, I think communication is such an important thing, and it doesn't happen intergenerationally, and at times doesn't happen at all because of the impact of intergenerational trauma. So I think that a big thing, again, like going back to the Black Lives Matter card movement, like just being able to print that out, and maybe you don't speak the language that your grandparents speak, right? But you can print that out and hand it to them, and it is a heart-to-heart conversation that starts. Maybe it doesn't, maybe your language skills or their language skills aren't adequate to hold a long-term conversation, but it is just an acknowledgement at the very least that there is an issue that plagues both of our communities.
I would like to see economic. I would like to see economic focus. I want to see economic prowess, and I want to see an economic deposit in the communities in which AAPI individuals make their money. So whether that be if it's a bank in Chinatown that loans to a community shop in Slauson Swap Meet or something, they should have a certain amount of money set aside to give to specifically African-American business owners. If you have a shop and you're making money off of a community, this just goes across the board. Like you should be investing a percentage of your money into schools, a percentage of your money into something to help out that community. So again, I feel like the first step is an apology. It's very, very important. It cannot be underestimated. I feel like speaking to someone's heart is the first step, because you can't even get to a conversation if people are mad at each other. And then from there, I think it's an easy rule of thumb. Like if you're in a community that's not your own and you're making money there, invest there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely. I think also with that, my solution would be centered around historical lessons. As an educator and a teacher, I think it'd be great for you, Tran, Mr. Tran, us, as well as other progressives to have these conversations in your local shops, wherever we got to go into those communities. I don't care if it's an outside backyard boogie, but we have to come together in order for us to understand, the history, like with Latasha Harlins, right? And a lot of people don't acknowledge that. And she's not the only one. There have been many people that, shop owners have called the police on. They have gotten, a criminal record from. And so we also just need to make sure that this history is being provided and then also offer some solutions. So I applaud you for coming on to this show and having this conversation with us. And also let us know what your book is, because I want to know what your book is so we can help you out with that. But
I'm not writing a book. I'm just reading this stuff, man. I'm not there yet. But it's called Open Borders. But yeah,
okay,
it's just Open Borders, and it's just a really good study on how, like intergenerationally, so many Americans have assimilated this country and found success, but at what cost, right? Like you lose that connectivity to your generations. Exactly. It's insane.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let us know where they can find you. I know you wanted to mention you have a podcast. I Am Podcast on Spotify. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so over the last year, obviously with the kind of mainstream movement that has been racial justice, one of the first things that we wanted to acknowledge was the hurt that was being applied to AAPI communities, especially in the early days of COVID. And unfortunately, it hasn't gone away. So again, in order to break this myth and just the monolithic society that is Asian American culture to an extent, we wanted to really highlight a lot of AAPI creators, politicians, and just small business owners about the work that they've been doing in their journey, struggling with the model minority myth, and just how they got to where they are now, right? Like, it's important for a lot of, especially students in any community, but especially for me as a Vietnamese man, to see someone, that looks like me, that's doing what I want to do, right? I think that is so important as a young kid, I wrote a paper once about just waking up on and going to the TV, right? And it's like I want to be like that, right? Like I think BIPOC children in this country don't have the same luxury that white kids do. And so for me, it was like, okay, let's get on this podcast and let's interview people who do a little bit of everything, right? Like I want any child of AAPI descent to look, to be like, okay, I want to be a comedian. That's the person I can aspire to be like, right? I want to be a politician. I can be like them. I think it's so important to have that north guiding star for BIPOC children, because otherwise, society is going to dictate to you what you're supposed to become, right? And that is definitely unfair to BIPOC children.
Definitely. And then you also, I Am Not a Virus. Follow you, the I Am Not a Virus movement. And can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Not a Virus was, again, kind of the parent to the podcast, if you will. They were able to, just sponsor us and all that. But it was created out of an effort to stop AAPI hate. And we've also been doing a lot of work. We hosted an event last year about talking to the Black community about the harm and the difficulties of intercultural conversations. And we're primarily working on increasing the level of BIPOC education in civics. They're based out of Connecticut, and it's something that we're still pushing for. But just integrating API history and Black history into more of the mainstream curriculum, because at the end of the day, it's kind of I don't want to say anything too aggressive right now, but it's kind of
go for it, let it out.
It's absolute bullshit that is not incorporated in American history, right? Like if we want to pretend all of us are Americans and yet you focus it on a white dominant centric lens, that's not American history. That's white history, right? I want American history to be focused on the unsung heroes, the Asian Americans, and the Black Americans that contributed their lives to this country and deserve historical recognition. There are so many people that go lost through the channels of history simply because they were, outdone by some mediocre white dude.
I love it. So make sure you guys are following I Am Not a Virus and keeping up with Kenney Tran. We want to honor you and thank you for being here. We know this could have been really, really intimidating for
Thank you. Appreciate always having these conversations with you.
I love it. I can tell that you've been having these conversations. And again, it just kind of reiterated in my mind that there's hope, because there are, the younger generation, those of us that are educating and equipping ourselves, arming ourselves with proper education, that we're going to be having these intercultural conversations, and things are potentially going to be better in the future. But we still need to have, these conversations with Granny and Pawpaw and all of them too, because they're still here and they're still owning shops and they're still benefiting on the backs of my people as well. So I definitely thank you for being here. And then we'll just go around and have some last words. I'll start with you, our other guest, Miss Eliza. Did you have any final words for this evening? Still on mute.
Yes, I would like to say my final words are thank you for even having me here. I would like to highlight, I hope it didn't get lost in translation, that we're just targeting elderly Asian individuals, because I also feel like there's also, racism within the younger. It's across. It's generational, right? It's a multitude of individuals, right, that racism can be attributed to, and it's a individual and each person, right, has their own experience with it. And with that being said, I thank you for being here, Kenney. I also want to thank everyone for this opportunity in light of everything that occurred this week, especially considering Ma'Khia Bryant, right? And I just want to remind everyone that she was a child. And when we talk about race, inequality, this idea that systemic oppression exists through foster care, education, access to adequate medical care. And so we have to take into that multitude of factors into her death, not just her having a weapon in her hand. And so that's what I would like to leave everyone with. Consider Ma'Khia Bryant and all the youth that are in foster care currently.
Definitely. And then where can our followers get in contact with you, reach you, follow your movement? Is there anything specifically, any call to action that you're a part of?
Yes, you can follow me at Queen E is Frank on Instagram. Or you can follow me on Facebook, Eliza Franklin Edmondson. And essentially I'm just moving through space, right? Trying to do the best I can.
Awesome. Thank you. I know our co-hosts, I think we're having a couple of little technical difficulties, so I do apologize. They didn't just leave because they didn't want to hear what you had to say. But we are going to be hopping over to our Instagram for our after hours show. For those of you that want to come and still engage in this conversation, please follow Kenney. Please follow Eliza. Follow us at yup_network. I just want to thank everyone for just being a part of this conversation. We had it later than usual because we did want to allow for some time to let Mr. Biden say what he had to say and for us to kind of give our thoughts based upon that. But everyone have a wonderful week and thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye.